So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga chapter 384, and I'm here to do my review of this chapter because this chapter does a lot of interesting and fun things that I enjoy about My Hero Academia when it comes to heroisms, when it comes to the themes of heroisms, and when it comes to how characters are interacting with All For One in probably the best way they possibly can. So, let's dive right into this chapter review and see what's going on in this chapter. But first, hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my review of My Hero Academia Manga chapter 384, titled A Small World, or It's a Small World. And no, this title isn't a reference to the song and attraction It's a Small World after all, but no, it is referencing the idea that the world that My Hero Academia, and very much like our own world, is a very small world due to the fact how technology has connected us to people around the world. So the point of it being a very small world in reference to both our world and the world of My Hero Academia makes sense because this theme of technology, communication, and connections is a running theme in the world of My Hero Academia, specifically the connections part. And we'll be getting to what this connection is being done within this story, but this is going to be the running theme of this chapter, how the connections that people have had, as well as severed connections that people had, really affects who they are in this moment and the actions that they are taking right now. For starters, let's talk about the severed connection that we get in this chapter, which is in reference to Gigantomachia. Because we see that in this chapter, Gigantomachia is brainwashed, and All For One notices what's happening, and he realizes that what is happening to Gigantomachia is most likely what happened to Aoyama and his parents. So at this moment, All For One just believes that as long as he's able to break this brainwashing or break this hold that the heroes have on Gigantomachia, that it's going to be putting him at an advantage and putting the heroes at a disadvantage. Because that is the risk of bringing Gigantomachia close to All For One. Yes, he can be used to fight against him, but if his hold is broken in reference to Shinzo's brainwashing being broken on Gigantomachia, a fear that this will allow for All For One to control Gigantomachia again and really have to fight against two powerhouses instead of just one. Many characters in the chapter bring this up. But what is interesting about this is that even though All For One delivers an attack that may or may not have breaking Gigantomachia out of Shinzo's brainwashing, as we do get a fun panel of Kirishima blocking and protecting Shinzo as his bodyguard, but even after that, we do something very much unexpected, which is that we get into the character as well as potentially the person of who Gigantomachia is. Because Gigantomachia seems to be speaking to All For One, but it is very much uncertain whether or not he's being brainwashed in this moment, or that he's continued to be brainwashed by Shinzo. But he has this very interesting dialogue and interaction with All For One about how All For One abandoned him, and that Shinzo did have a hold on Gigantomachia while he was running towards the direction of All For One. However, very much like Deku when it came to brainwashing, he was strong enough to gain or regain some of his own senses. And what was happening in that moment is that he was gaining rage and anger towards All For One for abandoning him. And he was gaining rage and anger against All For One who abandoned him. And that is kind of the main connection being broken between All For One and Gigantomachia, because what All For One did was abandon him not once, but twice. He abandoned Gigantomachia as we get a small flashback in the woods as he said that his successor is going to come back to him and bring him back. But then Gigantomachia also remembers what happened during the war, and that even though his voice and his smell were completely different, that he could still tell in a way that it was All For One. That he finally came to a realization that All For One has abandoned him, so at this moment, whether or not he's brainwashed or not, he's fighting against his master, and probably the biggest betrayal in the series so far. So this really shows how connections are important to the characters as well as to the story, because by abandoning him in Jaku City after the war, it severed the connection between All For One and Gigantomachia, making Gigantomachia an ally or an enemy against All For One. So it's cool to see how the connections and this idea is really associated to both the characters and the story, because the entire point of All for One and One for All are the connections that the characters built along this path. And how All for One builds his connections due to fear and manipulation, the heroes did it by connecting to one another through emotions and experience. So it's great to see that All for One is getting his comeuppance, as we do get a very beautiful image of Gigantomachia, Dark Shadow, as well as Mount Lady and Inasa going in for massive attacks against him. As we cut over to a helicopter showing another connection when it comes to the story of My Hero Academia, which is the connection between the people and the heroes. Because a helicopter is actually coming in, and many people thought that this helicopter was going to be All Might coming in to fight in the battle, or maybe some foreign heroes, but in actuality, what you would find on a helicopter like this are nothing but news reporters and journalists. However, these aren't just random journalists, no, these are journalists that we've actually seen in the story in the past chapters. One of the journalists that we see in this chapter is actually someone that we saw very early on in the series, around chapter 12, who actually interviewed Deku as he was entering UA, around the time that Tomoe Shigaraki was able to invade UA at the time. And that she remembers Deku and interviewing him, and she comes to a realization of how much he's grown over the past year. And how she comes to a realization that she wants to be here to record how the heroes are fighting against the villains, not necessarily because it's going to be a big scoop, but because she wants to. And even though she says that she's like a reporter through and through, and this is what a reporter should do, it's something even deeper inside of her, especially from what we get from the other reporter that we actually saw in chapter 306 when she was criticizing Endeavor for what he has done or what he has lacked to do. And this reporter just comes out and says that it's not about journalism, it's that she wants to see what is going to happen. And that she was more or less inspired by the fact that even though the heroes had nothing to gain from continuing to fight, that they still continued. That they fought for the sake of the people, even if it means potential death. And that whether or not they win or lose, they really want to broadcast this battle to the entire world, at least to show the world that Japan has not lost and that they are still fighting. Basically, they want to know that the fight isn't over yet and that there is still potential for the heroes to win. As we see that what is being broadcast is not just a fight between Deku and Shigaraki, which is done in a very beautiful page, also is broadcasting the fight between All for One and the other heroes. And that something very interesting that I liked about the chapter is that we got multiple images of how the battle is being portrayed and recorded via Gentle's YouTube channel. And we see that it grows from 7,600 viewers to over 20,000. And it's just going to keep growing and growing, as the final page of this chapter is showing a whole bunch of heroes as well as characters that we may have seen or not seen within the story, watching the video play out in its entirety. And there are a lot of cameos that I want to point out. And the characters in this double page spread are interesting. We get to see from like left to right, we get to see Knuckle Duster, the former hero, Elec Plant from Two Heroes. We also get to see Katsumo and Mahoro from Heroes Rising. We also get to see the first like more clear image of Melissa Shield once again from Two Heroes. On the right, we get to see Salam the hero, potentially Rhodey and his siblings from World's Heroes Mission, as well as Akbar and the President of United States. Maybe Deku Midoriya's father in the panel with the cat? Yeah, a lot of familiar faces, and there's something that you can say about this chapter when it comes to the canonicity of the movies. Either way, what this is showing is the connection that the heroes are trying to build with the people once again by broadcasting this fight around the world. Which is an idea of My Hero Academia, is that heroes are heroes not just because they are professionals, but the actions and the sacrifices that they are able to make are able to connect to the people in a meaningful way, and that is what is going to be demonstrated by this war. That the heroes are truly heroes, and they're not doing it for the fame of the fortune, but the idea of what it means to be a hero. And this idea is going to be spreading across the world, making the world smaller and more connected. But yeah, this was a very fun chapter when it comes to tackling the themes of My Hero Academia, when it comes to connections, when it comes to heroisms, and when it comes to just how these characters are interacting with one another. I know some people may not like this chapter because of this, but me personally, this is what I enjoy about My Hero Academia. These smaller moments where we really tackle the themes of connections, heroism, and what's not, and really apply them to the chapters themselves. So overall, I really did enjoy this chapter. I enjoyed how we get a little bit more, should I say, development from Gigantomachia, as well as the relationship that he now has with All For One, and that he is fighting because he is no longer an ally for All For One and is now All For One's enemy. I enjoyed that, as well as me personally enjoying the cameos at the end of the chapter, as well as the reintroduction of the reporters actually being in this war, not for the sake of gaining like prestige, but because this is what they should do, and that whether or not it's personal or it has to do with more of the idea of what it means to be a reporter, they're all connected and they're trying to broadcast this to the world and show the world that the heroes in Japan haven't given up, and that heroes in general should never give up and be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice if it means protecting the people. So yeah, really did enjoy this chapter. What did you think of the chapter? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Did you enjoy the cameos? And are there any cameos that I missed? And do you think that that character with the cat is actually Midoriya, the father of Deku? Leave your thoughts down below. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to get you in my next video. Goodbye!